The most dangerous form of control doesn't shout. It whispers. It comes with pretty words. It hides in kind promises. It wraps itself in the language of safety, unity, and progress. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. That's the genius of manipulation. You don't even notice it until your own thoughts are no longer yours. Have you ever repeated a slogan without questioning it? Shared something because everyone else is saying it? Silenced your doubts because it felt easier than asking hard questions? This isn't coincidence. It's design. George Orwell understood this better than anyone. If you don't know George Orwell, he's the guy who wrote Animal Farm, a brilliant story that shows how pretty words can hide brutal power. He didn't show us control through violence or surveillance. He showed us how power can be taken and kept by those who control language. Words like equality, freedom, and loyalty are repeated so often they lose their meaning. The animals don't resist, not because they agree, but because the words sound good. They forget to ask what the words actually mean. And that's where it begins. When you replace thinking with repetition, when you swap awareness for emotion, you open the door to quiet domination. A slogan repeated 1,000 times becomes truth, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. In Animal Farm, the pigs change the commandments. They say, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The words stay soft, but the meaning? Twisted, and no one resists. Ask yourself, in your life, what phrases have you accepted without thought? What ideas sound noble, but hide something darker? This isn't just literature. This is your world. Because as Orwell warned, political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. Let that sink in. So how exactly does this happen? How can something as soft as a word become a weapon, sharper than any blade, more powerful than any law? It begins with repetition, but not just any repetition, emotional repetition. Words like betrayal, unity, hope, enemy, progress, they are repeated with tone, with rhythm, with urgency, until they no longer describe something real, but become emotional triggers, like buttons inside your brain. Press one, and your reaction is automatic. You don't need to think anymore. The word does it for you. That's how propaganda works. And that's how, in Animal Farm, the pigs slowly took over, not just the farm, but the minds of every animal on it. Remember the sheep? They had only one line to chant. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Simple, repetitive, emotional. And over time, that phrase replaced thought. Later, when the pigs started walking on 2 legs, becoming more and more like the humans they once overthrew, the sheep didn't question it. They just changed the chant too. 4 legs good, 2 legs better. No confusion, no resistance, just obedience, programmed through words. Sounds familiar? Because it's not just fiction. We live in a world where phrases become shields against accountability. National security, public health, for the greater good. They sound noble, but when repeated without scrutiny, they become blank checks for power to do whatever it wants. It's not that these phrases are inherently wrong. It's that they're used as replacements for thought. You're no longer allowed to ask, what's actually happening behind these words? If you question, you're labeled unpatriotic, uncaring, difficult. You're pushed to choose sides instead of think. And slowly, your critical thinking muscle atrophies. You become, as Orwell would say, a creature who has ceased to think and become a mere echo. And here's the scary part. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens one softened phrase at a time. One don't be negative at a time. One trust the process at a time. Until eventually, silence becomes the default. Doubt becomes shameful. And questioning feels like betrayal. In Animal Farm, the pigs change the rules again and again. Each time, they make them shorter, vaguer, more symbolic than concrete. Why? Because symbols are harder to argue with. You can debate a fact. You can't debate a flag. You can't debate loyalty. And that's how truth dies. Not with censorship, but with soft slogans that replace it. So ask yourself, what phrases in your world seem too sacred to question? What words silence debate instead of starting one? If we don't pause and examine these words, we'll keep walking in circles, feeling free, but thinking exactly as we're told. Here's something most people don't realize. The most dangerous part of language manipulation isn't what it adds, it's what it erases. In Animal Farm, the pigs didn't just create slogans to inspire, they used them to delete doubt. The animals no longer asked questions. They no longer saw injustice. They just repeated what they were told until those words became their identity. Boxer the horse is the perfect example. His motto, Napoleon is always right. He wasn't stupid. He was strong, hardworking, loyal. But those very traits were weaponized against him. He became so loyal, so obedient, so trusting, that he marched straight to his own destruction without ever questioning it. Sound familiar? In our world, loyalty is often praised as a virtue, but when it's blind, it becomes a leash. People are trained, sometimes by parents, sometimes by schools, sometimes by media, to believe that obedience is nobility. So we hear things like, just do your job, don't question your leaders, keep the peace, trust the experts. Each of these phrases seems harmless, but together, they create a culture where thinking for yourself becomes rebellion, where silence is a sign of respect, where complicity is called unity. And here's the trap. The more you repeat these ideas, the more you internalize them, until eventually, they don't feel like something you were told. They feel like who you are. This is how manipulation becomes identity. You don't need surveillance. You don't need threats. You just need to convince people that submission is a form of virtue. And once that's done, they'll police themselves. They'll silence their own doubts. They'll attack anyone who thinks differently, not because they're evil, but because they think they're protecting the truth. That's how systems of control survive for decades. Not through force, but through belonging. Because once people feel their identity is tied to an idea, they'll do anything to protect it, even if that idea is a lie. In Animal Farm, the commandments painted on the barn slowly changed, but the animals barely noticed. Because the words weren't just on the wall anymore. They were inside their heads. Ask yourself, what beliefs do you hold that you never chose? What ideas feel like truth simply because you heard them early and often? That's how the programming works. Not by forcing you, but by making it feel natural. That's why George Orwell wasn't just warning us about governments. He was warning us about ourselves, about how easily we surrender our minds when comfort and conformity are offered. And maybe the real rebellion today isn't shouting louder, it's thinking deeper. Here's where it gets terrifying. Language doesn't just guide thought, it replaces it. In Animal Farm, the pigs didn't need prisons. They had words. They began to rewrite the past right in front of the animals' eyes. Not with facts, but with phrases. One of the most iconic moments? When the commandment, all animals are equal, mysteriously becomes, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. It's absurd. It's logically impossible. And yet it works. Why? Because when words are repeated often enough, they override logic. And when no one dares to question them, they become truth by default. Let that sink in. You don't need force to erase truth. You just need enough people to stop asking questions. This is the final stage of manipulation. When people no longer remember what freedom felt like, because the illusion of freedom has been perfectly maintained. The pigs say, we work for all animals, but they live in luxury while the others starve. They say, we protect you, but they train dogs to enforce fear. They say, we are equal, but they walk on two legs and drink with humans. And here's the genius of Orwell's warning. It's not just about one farm or one regime or one dictator. It's about a pattern, a blueprint for control. It starts with noble words. Then those words are bent. Then the new meaning is enforced. And finally, no one remembers what the old meaning even was. Ask yourself, how many terms today have been twisted like this? Freedom, that means obedience. Progress, that means silence. Unity, that means conformity. Peace, that means control. The manipulation isn't just in what's said. It's in what's left out. It's in the rewriting of memory, in the silence around contradiction, in the slow erosion of what words used to mean. And when that happens, you don't just lose rights. You lose the very language to describe what's been taken from you. Because if you can't name injustice, you can't fight it. That's why Orwell once said, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. The pigs understood this, and so do many in our world today. It's not always done with malice. Sometimes it's just apathy. Sometimes it's survival. But the result is the same. We stop thinking. We stop questioning. We stop remembering. And when that happens, the revolution doesn't need to be crushed, because it no longer exists. Not out there. Not in here. Just forgotten.